And it says we're live. Okay. All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to my channel. Today we have a Bashment Book Club special. I'm calling it All Things Queeribbean. I owe that to Doreen because she uses it quite a lot. So today we will be discussing not just one book in particular like we usually do, but we will be discussing queer Caribbean literature in general. And we have a guest with us today. So I want everybody to introduce themselves. And maybe our guest can go first. And yes. Yes.
Okay. All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Jeraine. I am the founder of Rebel Women Lit Book Club. It started off as a book club. Now it's a podcast, a bookstore, a library, and a bunch of other things. And I've been trying to psych myself up to start a YouTube thing. Like, I've been watching Saajid and I was like, okay, I can do this. So hopefully this gives me the confidence to just start that.
Yes.
So, yeah. I'm happy to be here to be discussing Caribbean books.
Yeah. Okay. Paige?
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Paige. I'm from Minimal Bookie. I am Barbadian, and I think we're going to do identifiers, she, her, and also bi. So for context of this conversation.
I am Linnell. I'm from the Weekend Reader blog. I'm from the U.S. Virgin Islands, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I am straight. I don't know why I said it like that.
You sounded very sad about that fact. And like,
I know.
You were so disappointed. Okay, and well, you know me. My name is Saajid. I'm from Trinidad. He, they pronouns. So we're just going to get straight into the discussion. And what we're going to do is we're going to just like throw out a few questions for everybody, and we'll just take the discussion from there. So the first question I have for all of us is, what queer Caribbean books have you read recently, either this year, this month, last month, maybe Pride Month, whatever you consider recently? And what were your thoughts on them? Did you get any new favorite authors, any standout titles?
I can start. I am still in the process because I've been in a bit of a reading slump of reading Juliet Takes a Breath, which has been such an interesting read for me because one of my friends, like my first booktube friends, really likes the book. And I have really been enjoying reading about the diaspora experience of being queer, like here, but still having the influence of like the religious aspect of a lot of Caribbean households. And yeah, so for anybody who doesn't know, it's about a girl who comes out to her parents right before she leaves to go on an internship. So she like drops this bomb and then is like, okay, peace, I'm not dealing with this. I'll see you guys later. And it's just about exploring like her finding her own identity, which is really cool.
Nice. Jeraine?
Oh no.
I think she's stuck.
Oh, give me a second.
All right, well, Linnell, you want to go in the meantime?
So I'm going to turn it off and I'll be right back.
Okay. Okay, cool. Great.
So the most recent book that I read is Clap When You Land.
Oh, okay.
Oh, we can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the book I'm reading right now.
I think there might be a lag.
Mm.
Yeah. Okay. Technical difficulties.
There's a lag.
Always. It would not be a live show if we didn't have technical difficulties. Let's be honest. Like, this is our brand.
Did I send out the wrong link?
Hold on. Who?
All right, let me know if I should go or someone.
Oh, we thought you were re-logging in. You can go.
You want to like log back in, Jeraine? Like come back in with the link? Maybe it might help. Okay, cool.
So I can go while she's getting situated.
Oh God, that was closer to my face.
So I read Clap When You Land last month, and it features a lesbian couple. It's YA, and so it's about a family. I would say family drama a little bit, because you find out this dad has two daughters and they're having like different life experiences. But what I thought was really interesting is that this is the first time I've read a Caribbean non-hetero couple that wasn't like a big deal. The girls were able to just love each other, and it was sweet and it was endearing, and their parents, their families didn't treat them any different. And I thought I think it's the first time I've read a storyline where it wasn't a big deal. So I really appreciated that.
My most recent one is one that I'm currently reading, and that's Serious Blooms at Night.
Yes, I have that. That's my next one.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I got that too.
Oh yeah, because we were thinking
You're gonna
about
read it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's really good. Y'all should definitely get into it. I read this book from her earlier this year, so I wanted to read something new from her. Well, this is her debut novel, and it's going really good so far. It's set in a fictional Caribbean island that's very much inspired by Trinidad. And it just kind of looks at two different timelines. This guy is taking care of an old woman, an elderly woman in a nursing home. And then we're also getting the background of this elderly woman. So it's like two different timelines. And the guy is gay. The woman, I don't know if she's gay, but like pretty much everybody else in the story is gay. It's just very gay. And I love it. Like it's a very, very queer book. Shani Mutu's books, like both of her books so far that I read or that I'm reading, like it just gets gayer and gayer. You think it's just going to be the one or two gay characters and then everybody gay. It's like, I love it. I love it. Yes, Kiki. Yeah, Sirius is great. You should read it. Valmiki's Daughter was fantastic. It does have a lot of trigger warnings because trauma and all that kind of stuff, but we'll get into that. So Jareen is back. Do you want to tell us about what you've been reading or what you've read recently?
Yeah, well, I don't know why the internet decided to embarrass me today. The book I'm currently reading is Romance in Marseille, which is by Claude McKay. It was published, well, it wasn't published until earlier this year. Or was it last year? It was published late last year, but he had written it in the 1930s. And it wasn't published because they thought it was too risky to publish at the time. So I picked this up. I didn't even read much of what the summary was. I just saw it and I was like, Claude McKay, unpublished, gay, yes, let me read it. So I'm about halfway through and it's absolutely nothing what I expected. I thought it was going to be a love story. It's not a love story. It's a story about revenge. It's a story about getting back at people who did you dirty. And it's amazing. It also has, the main character has a disability. The main character is also queer. There's representations of prostitution in there. And it's just all these things that I would not have expected from the book. So not a love story at all. I love the pacing of it. And I'm glad that it's been published and I'm liking it. I don't see enough people talking about it though. I thought there would have been a bigger buzz since it was not published until recently. I saw a few articles in the New York Times. I haven't seen much locally or even regionally about it. So once I finish, I need to start making noise about the book.
Definitely. I don't think I've heard of it. What's the title again?
Romance in Marseille.
Romance in Marseille. Okay, I have to look into that. It sounds really interesting. Yeah. Okay.
So Claude McKay is queer, like because a lot of his poetry talks about being with both men and women. We don't know if you identify as bi, but I think the umbrella term we're going with is queer for him. So it's really great to see that a lot of his other work being recognized and also his identity, because I do think a lot of your queer ancestors in the Caribbean kind of get erased. So I'm glad that this is coming up.
Okay. So the next question that we have here is, what are some of your all-time favorite queer Caribbean books or authors. So there's a lot to choose from. So what would you say is your faves?
I think the one that I keep going back to, I know that they write like heavy topics, but it's dear to my heart, is the author of Patsy and of Here Comes the Sun. I haven't read Patsy yet. That's like next. That's on my list. Yes. But I just feel like the writing style is very much on that straddling line of like commercial, but also very literary, and it focuses on the minute details of day-to-day life in a way that like I hadn't experienced until I first read Here Comes the Sun. And as somebody who lives outside of the Caribbean now, it felt like returning to home in a way, but like not in the way that a lot of authors write, where they sort of romanticize what it's like to live in the Caribbean. It wasn't like especially, and like for a white audience, you didn't feel like it was written for a white audience. So yeah.
Linnell, Doreen?
Yeah, I think if I had to reconsider the things that I've read, I think a year ago I would have said Here Comes the Sun, but I feel like I would say today Hurricane Child, only because I think there's this larger conversation about when do you start understanding your sexuality, and I feel like somehow we've gotten it in our heads that it happens later in life. And when you start really exploring and understanding who you are, I think it happens around the time where you actually put words to your language. So I think Hurricane Child, separate from the magical realism, which I, still struggled with, but I think in terms of capturing how that experience could be written in at a younger age, I think it was done well. I'm looking down because I'm sending out the right link to Twitter. So, I'm paying attention.
I think Saajid's frozen now.
Oh no.
It happens all the time.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess I'll just go. I was gonna say Nicole Dennis Ben, but
yeah,
I think I talk about her all the time. I love her to pieces. And she's very inspirational in why I decided to make this club public and open. But I'm gonna talk about Nala Hopkinson. She is based in Canada and she writes a lot of sci-fi work, lots of speculative fiction, sci-fi. It gets classified as magical realism. She doesn't really subscribe to that term, but more. And yeah, so I didn't know Nala Hopkinson was queer until I think probably the second book that I read from her. And I recently read The Salt Roads. I know, Saajid, you had that on your to-read list. Did you get around to it?
I didn't get around to it because I'm the absolute worst, but I have it on my Kindle and I want to read it as soon as I can.
It is so good and so sexy and so hot. And I was just like, I was not expecting the time travel. It also features, I have a thing I'm realizing for Caribbean books that talk about abortion in a way that isn't very medical or not very US-centric. So there is that doctor who is on the plantation. She's the healer. And then there's the European doctor that comes. Oh gosh, I'm going to talk about the entire book. But anyways, Nala Hopkinson is she does amazing blending of our real world with the sci-fi world, and she crosses those two over because I do think spirituality in the Caribbean is very fluid, and I think she writes that very well. And she also does very huge commentary on our colonial history and what that means for us. And Nala Hopkinson is just amazing. And she has this collection with speculative Caribbean fiction writers. I do believe it's also print now. But if you guys can get hands on a used copy of that, it's so good.
Okay. What's it called?
Hold on 1 second.
It's a huge pile of books. Love it.
Let me check my catalog.
It's from Tree Roots. Yeah. So it has
Did-
Olive Seam, it has a whole bunch of Caribbean authors in there, and they're all writing speculative fiction. A good amount of it is queer, a good amount of it is just really weird, and it's amazing. Nala Hopkinson is godsend, and I don't think we talk about the amazing contribution she's made to Caribbean writing and sci-fi world. So yeah.
Mhm. I definitely need to get me into some Nalo because she's like classic at this point. For me, well, I mean, I guess one of my most recent favorites is obviously Valmiki's Daughter. It's a story about the dad and the father of this family, the dad and the daughter of this family. So Valmiki and his daughter Vivica, and they're both queer and closeted. And it's kind of like about the consequences of having to be closeted and live an inauthentic life for the sake of, being this in this upper class Indian family and like the kind of norms and pressures that come with that. And it's just so beautifully done. It's amazing. Just the way that she writes, the way that, like, it just reads like a love letter to Trinidad. But I really appreciate the way that she talks about queerness. And yeah, like it's very descriptive, like the plants and the scenery and everything like that. That's why Caribbean writers are superior, and you can't tell me nothing about it. That's one period. And yeah, but like just the way that she talks about queerness in a way that's so nuanced, like she's not trying to push an agenda or trying to like, push any kind of message. She's just writing about it as authentically as possible for these characters, like as realistically as possible. And it's really heartbreaking, but also fascinating, and I really liked it. Obviously, Hurricane Child. This is a Bashment book club read. We read it. It was amazing. Brother by David Chariandi, which is like low key.
Yeah, that was
Love.
good. That was good.
Love.
Yeah.
I haven't read that.
You need to read it. It is
Oh my God.
it's like 100 pages. It's like literally 180 pages. Like it's so good. And it's about these two brothers in Canada. Their parents are from Trinidad, but they grew up in Toronto. And it's about police brutality, it's about masculinity, it's about boyhood, it's about loss. And it's kind of dealing with the relationship between these two brothers, one of whom may or may not, I mean, you kind of get the sense from very early on in the book that he is queer. And just the way that it's talked about throughout the story and the way that it kind of subtly exists, I think was just done really beautifully. So yeah, we stand David Chariandi, read all his
Yeah.
books.
That was a really good book.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
I think what I really liked about that book too is that it talks about like the migration story of many Caribbean families where you have to succeed, you have to make it right, but then there are all of these things that are systematic things that are set up that really could inhibit you from excelling. And the other thing that I really appreciated too is how he wrote grief, like from the mother's perspective and the living brother's perspective. It was so like, I'm pretty sure I cried at well, I cry at most of the books. I don't know what I'm saying. But I'm pretty sure I was like boo-hooing like in my chest crying for that one.
Yeah, it was sad. It's a sad book. Like if you're not like ready for something sad, maybe hold off on Brother. But like, it's great. It's great otherwise. So the next question I have here is what will our experiences with queerness in the Caribbean / diaspora, and have those experiences been reflected in the literature that we read?
Say that again.
So, what were our experiences of queerness in the Caribbean? Maybe not just experiences, but like what we've observed about queerness in the Caribbean, the nuances that we've observed and seen, or perhaps experienced ourselves. So what are those, and whether in the diaspora or in the Caribbean, and have we do we see those experiences that we observe on a day-to-day basis reflected in the literature about queer Caribbeanness?
I feel like thinking of like Brother and like other stories about like the coming out experience, like Juliet Takes a Breath, for example. I feel like when I was younger, there was a lot more explicit homophobia in my culture, in my surroundings. and the frustration of like, I never understood when I was younger why I was so upset when people would say that kind of stuff. And because it felt like for the longest time, I feel like it's the same here with religious households. You feel like you have to repress that part of yourself because you see other people say it's a negative thing and that's something you have to unlearn. So I feel like there's a generational shift happening where like the older people still don't quite like, they're learning perhaps to be less homophobic. They're still like, it's still rooted in the culture. But I feel like a lot of younger people have been a lot more accepting, I've noticed, like specifically like in my friend group circles back in Barbados. And like I've seen it reflected like the same way in Juliet Takes a Breath. The father sort of just accepts what's happening, but the mom has a very hard time because she believes that it's going to make her daughter's life harder. And I feel like that was like something that I really connected with when I was reading that book.
Yeah. I mean, for me, there's certain things that I've definitely seen, like, especially in Nicole Dennis Ben book. I think when Here Comes the Sun, because I haven't read Patsy as yet, but when I was reading Here Comes the Sun, I remember just like kind of having to stop at certain points and just close the book, because there were just things that the way that they were saying it, even though it's a different context, it's in Jamaica and whatnot, like that just really resonated with me and my experience, and the kind of frustration that you have when you know this is who you are, but you can't really live it outwardly. And Valmiki's daughter, I think, excellently dealt with that as well, and the ways in which we kind of have to just conform to the point where people mightn't even know, because Valmiki is literally a player in the book. Like, he has all these girlfriends and stuff to kind of compensate for the fact, like, this man had a million beards, including his wife, right? So, like, it was just a really interesting thing to see, and I do think that that's very realistic for a lot of people's experience. But I also feel like there's a lot missing, and I guess we could talk about this when we reach down to the question about religion a little bit more. But like, coming from the Muslim context and coming from like a Muslim environment, there's a specific type of homophobia that is, that comes with that, and especially at the intersection of like a Caribbean community. So that's not something that I've ever seen in the books that I've read. I've read like 2 Indo-Caribbean Muslim books, like, and I don't know of any others. So I do think that there's some stuff that still, that we haven't seen or really been able to explore in literature about queerness in the region. So I do hope that within the next couple of years, more authors are able to kind of publish and cover those experiences, so that readers could see those things. Like readers like me. Maybe I might have to write a book. I don't know. We'll see.
I think whenever I read Caribbean literature, it feels like you have to hide yourself when you're in country, but somehow when you leave, say, to America or Canada or some other country that's not your home country, you're able to be free. And then culturally, people say it's because you were in that environment, you were influenced, rather than it's a part of my identity. And I think that's something that hopefully contemporary Caribbean literature will kind of confront, that it's not like you leave and you become a different person. It was in a lot of ways could be safer. You can find community and be open when you move away versus being in country and being faced with violence. But I know you can face violence when you're anywhere, right? Being queer. But I feel like that's one of the observations that I've seen in literature.
I think I'm still yet to see. I realized I didn't say earlier. I'm identify as pansexual for now. I guess queer works. But I'm yet to see something that I think represents me on the page. But I've seen bits and pieces of it all over, and I think more importantly is that I've seen like something that reflects the society that I live in. So even if I'm not seeing my exact experience, I'm seeing, okay, this is what it's like being a lesbian, light-skinned woman in Jamaica. And I think Michelle Cliff does a great job of that. Michelle Cliff, I'm trying to remember when she wrote. I believe it was probably in the 70s. I don't remember. Michelle Cliff died ages ago, but she was openly a lesbian, and she was light-skinned uptown Jamaica, which is complete different experience than if you are dark-skinned or poor in Jamaica. And I appreciated that was a perspective that was there. Nicole Dennis Ben, as we spoke about, does write from the perspective of being poor and dark-skinned and lesbian or along that spectrum here in Jamaica. And Kai Miller, who wrote Fear of Stones, which was the first time I saw queer representation in a book in the Caribbean. And I went, oh my God, he's allowed to write this and people like it. It's a story about a very feminine boy who moved away from Jamaica. I think he moved well, there's a story because it's a collection of stories. But it talks about him moving away, and when he comes back, the fear that he feels being in Jamaica. But it's a type of a longing for Jamaica, because I think a lot of queer people, we do have a lot of a love-hate relationship with the Caribbean. I like to think of it as cycles of going through grief, where it's just like, oh, I accept it. People are not going to accept me, I'll be fine. And then one minute you're happy, next minute you're upset and you're angry. And I think Kai Miller does a really great job of writing stories with queer characters that color them outside of just being queer. So even if it's not as political as I think Nicole does, where Nicole is just like, yo, these are all the intersections. I think Kai does more subtle. This is the history of what it means to be queer in the Caribbean. And I think those are just some of the authors that I really appreciated seeing. And Annie John is also a good example, I think, of a young girl discovering her sexuality and figuring out what that is. I've heard that Jamaica Kincaid doesn't think Annie is queer, but I think Annie is queer. Everybody thinks Annie's queer. So, you're the artist. It doesn't matter anymore. We accept it. Hurricane Child, I think, is also great. I love seeing the new set of writers that are coming out, especially for children's books, that are saying, hey, they're kids, and sexuality isn't just based on having sex. It's who you're attracted to, it's who you're not attracted to. So I love that. And I love that I'm seeing so many different variations of the queer Caribbean story, because we're not just a single story. So I'm looking forward to more being written as more people get, I don't want to say permission, but more people are being encouraged to write and share Caribbean stories.
Yeah, what you said about like being like, well, they're allowed to write about this. I felt that deeply. Like, I feel like a lot of times sexuality, especially if it's not like heterosexual, is very much like you just don't talk about it. It's like if people accept it, they just ignore that it's happening. And I feel like that's why I gravitate toward these kinds of stories, because it's like, oh, like finally seeing other people existing in similar spaces without having to hide the fact. Like,
and I think what I really love is that Caribbean writers, and I see it a lot with European queer stories, American queer stories, mostly like a lot of Western queer stories, being queer becomes the thing about the story. And I think in the Caribbean, the writers I've seen is just like, being queer is a huge part of the story, but there's so many other things happening. And there's so many other things happening in my life, in my sections. I think naturally Caribbean writers are superior, like just have to be to get published. So
But one thing I've been saying is that I need to read more K. Miller, because I've just heard excellent things about his books. So we have at the library, so I definitely need to go. Yeah, I know. I need to like maybe do like a year where I only read Caribbean books, because there's so much that I haven't read that I need to read. Like it's ridiculous. Like there's a plethora of options out there. The next question that I have. Was that?
I was saying Miller is one of those authors I've never given anything less than 5 stars to.
Ooh.
Really?
Every time I think, honestly, every time I'm just like, oh God, I'm always dreading when he comes out with a new book. I'm like, oh gosh, I'm just not going to like it. And I read
add everything to my cart.
Yeah, Camilla is amazing writer. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, I definitely need
and he's
to.
funny. Follow him on Twitter.
When I get back onto Twitter in like 3 years.
How long is your hiatus gonna be for?
I don't know. It just depends on like when I feel like it. We'll see. We'll see when I come back. Yeah, back in like a week. No. Okay. So yeah, note to self: read more Camilla and Mallow Hopkinson. Those are like two of the main ones.
You know what we can do? We can put like a list of books we talk about in the comments, so people can have reference to it.
Yeah, we could do that. We could even make like, isn't there like an option to make like Goodreads pages? We could do like a queer Caribbean.
Oh, like a list. Yeah.
Yeah. Unless
Let's
somebody.
I'd be happy to help with that.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. Let's do that. Let's do that. That'll be an after project. Okay. So the next question is, what are our thoughts on religion and queerness in the region? So we kind of touched on this. And have we seen this represented in the queer Caribbean books that we read?
Yeah, I think religion is weaponized in a lot of ways to now allow people to be fully who they are. And I'm reading Conjure Women right now, and it's not Caribbean literature, but it has ties to African culture. They're referencing that, and it has me thinking about how like voodooism and all of things that are culturally relevant to us, a part of the diaspora, how colonization and separating us from how we live life pre-slavery has impacted us and actually made us more isolated and not really taking into consideration like all of these different things to help maintain a healthy community, which would be not to kick anybody out. So, African people, Caribbean people are very community focused. And I feel like once you put the religion part, especially like Christianity, so I'll just say it and not just be like vague, but when you look at the Christian lens, it starts to separate out people because they're not this way. And I think from my readings thus far, religion is just weaponized and it doesn't allow you to be who you are and separates you from your community. So that was a long expedition to get to that one point.
We love it. We love it.
Yeah, and I feel like from the like Barbadian perspective, like Christianity is like the biggest religion there, but it's like so intrinsically part of our schooling system as well. So like people are indoctrinated from such a young age to believe a certain way. And I feel like I have seen like even people who don't realize like why they're homophobic because it's just the culture that they've grown up in. And I feel like it's just like, even if it's not explicitly stated, it is just part of like the culture itself. And therefore you just see its effects in like every text that you're reading.
Yeah, we recently read The Stars and the Blackness Between Them by Janada Petrus. I feel like I'm always pronouncing her name incorrectly.
That's how you say it.
I really liked about it was because a lot of it has to do with spirituality, especially Afro-Caribbean spirituality, and it kind of contrasts with, again, Christianity. It contrasts with that because in those more spiritual and more Afrocentric type of spirituality and religions, they're a lot more open when it comes to queerness. There's an idea of community. There's an idea of it's love. It's we'll figure this out. We don't really have the labels for it, but it's a lot more open. It's a lot more accepting. Whereas Christianity was like a hard no. This is not what it is. So I think that was interesting. But what I don't see is I don't see queerness discussed outside of Christianity much. Maybe I'm just reading all the right books yet. Hopefully, you guys can recommend some for me. So outside of Christianity, I don't really see much, and also don't really see much when it comes to being atheist or agnostic when it comes to being queer. And I think that those two are like, you just put two terrible bad words together and you just say you're queer and atheist. How does that work? So I'd be very interested to read something like that. Because we have so much more to explore in terms of
Right.
Yeah, I definitely felt that because I mean, coming from a Muslim community, as I said before, like, you know, there's a specific type of homophobia and a specific experience that comes with being associated with the religion of Islam and being within this community. So, I mean, I've only read 2 books set in the Caribbean that follow Muslim characters. So, The Yad by Aliyah Inayat, which is in Trinidad, and A Silent Life by Rayan Shah, which is set in Guyana. So those are the only 2. Highly recommend, by the way, especially A Silent Life. It's amazing. But those are the only 2 books that I've read that follow like Muslim experiences, and I really don't know of any other novels other than maybe Rayan Shah might have another book or 2. Because neither does mention any possibility of anybody being queer. So it's I would find it really interesting to come across a book one day that kind of explores that intersect like Islam, Caribbeanness, and queerness, if that makes sense, and how that might look in a story. So I'm really looking forward to when that happens one day.
You mean when you write it?
We'll see when it happens.
Shots fired.
Oh, okay. But yeah, I mean, I've been like entertaining the idea of like writing. I've been writing little short things every now and again. And I mean, I'm not like a writer with a capital W, you know. Okay.
Oh, don't do that. Don't do that.
But like, I feel like, you know, one day when I mean, somebody might do it before me, which is fine, which is great. You know, I would love for more people from my community to be able to add to the canon and explore that intersection of queerness and Islam in the region. And, you know, more queerness and Indianness and that kind of stuff too. But yeah, I do think that if I do become a writer one day, that's definitely something that I want to explore in my work. Y'all will pre-order my book, right?
Of course. I
want a signed copy.
I will send y'all copies too. Don't worry. Y'all will have multiple. Y'all will have the UK edition, the US edition, the Japanese translation.
I love it.
Be able to read it. I'll send y'all all the copies. So that'll be in like 50 years from now because my procrastination is.
What?
I feel you.
Yeah.
Like you, and then everyone will pressure you to keep writing.
Hopefully we'll see. But Doreen, as you were mentioning, like a more agnostic experience, Valmiki's Daughter is actually a really interesting book for that because the family is Hindu on the page, but they don't actually practice their religion. And their religion isn't what polices their sexuality per se. Like, yes, as an upper class Hindu family, like the proper image. So it does have some influence, but it's not just the religion that intrinsically motivates them to, you know, be homophobic and to internalize homophobia. But it's more so about like, you know, being from an upper class community, being from an Indian community, and how race and class kind of work together to create notions and understandings of respectability. Because if you're from like an upper class Indian family or community, respectability is a huge thing. You need to have the macho dad and the respectable mom and the good daughters and the respectful sons and that kind of stuff. So this book really explores that. The mother in this book is a tyrant. She's like the one who enforces all of these things, not the dad. Like, he's very passive, but she's the one, like, every time, like, even in Here Comes the Sun, it's always the mother. Like, it's always the mother, right?
But isn't it, don't you think it's because the mother figure in most of those stories have had like some traumatic experience that reinforces they have to be this rigid tyrant type figure?
Yeah, and I think so. Yeah, and I think sometimes too, because women have experienced
Mm-hmm.
powerlessness, they negotiate their roles to be able to benefit from it as much as possible. So
Yeah.
maybe you can't be the top of the totem pole, but you're going to, like, get everything that you could possibly get out of being a wife, especially in an
Right.
upper context. So I think that
Mm-hmm.
was explored really well in this book, but it kind of goes back to what we were saying before about, like, that agnostic atheist experience. Even though this family is not, like, technically atheist, or maybe agnostic, they definitely don't care about God or sense of religion or Hinduism or spirituality in their lives at all. Like, they just say they're Hindu, but that's it. Like
Mhm.
nothing more than just labeling themselves as that. So it's interesting because it kind of shows that, oftentimes we might have the perception that, especially in the region, religion is what drives homophobia. But Linnell,
Yeah.
as you were saying before, religion is just a weapon
Mm-hmm.
to help guard something that is already there,
Yeah. Mhm.
something that's already built into our society. So yeah, I think this book does a really good job, During, since you were thinking about, like,
I ordered it because you couldn't stop talking about it on your channel. So I ordered it after your last video. I was just like, okay, fine, I'm just gonna get it because you're talking about this. So
my plan
I
is
should get
working.
it sometime this week. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. It's so good. And it's very, very detailed, very, just, it's a very in-depth story. It could be a little bit drawn out, but, like, I loved every second of it. I was like, give me all of the gay trauma.
Whenever I
Speaking,
see the cover now, I think about you because I'm just like, oh, that's the book he can't stop talking about. Honestly, I'm just like,
my
I
personality.
was just like, okay, that's the book they keep talking about, so I need to go get it. Yeah.
Yeah. Period. Everybody go read Shani Mutu. So the next question kind of builds off of, like, talking about trauma and that kind of stuff. And why the question is, why do you think so much queer Caribbean literature focuses on the trauma? And do we think that we will ever get to a place where queer Caribbean stories of joy are centered? Or are there stories of joy that are already out there that we, you know, haven't really read, or that some of us might have read but goes under the radar? And why is trauma, why is, like, most of the books about trauma and despair and all of those things?
Can I just say, if anybody is watching and knows a story of joy, please send it my way. I desperately need it because I feel like all the books I've read so far.
Even though,
Oh yeah.
even though a lot of it isn't based in the Caribbean, and like in the beginning, there's a bit of trauma that happens in Trinidad, but then when you get into the backstory of it, there is a lot of joy, and it just makes you feel so soft and beautiful and nice. And I'm just like, why couldn't my childhood have been this comforting?
Mm.
Which book is that?
The Stars and the Blackness Between Them. Yeah. I know you're kind of hesitant to start, but I think you should read it. The language I know kind of have, but you should read
I
it.
definitely. It's like, when I read it, like, the Creole was a little inaccurate, so it was just like,
So I've
really,
heard, yeah.
it was really difficult for me to, like, take it seriously, so I just had to stop. And then I listened to, like, a bit of the audiobook, and I was like, did Karen narrate this or something? Like, what's going on here?
Wow.
It's just, yeah.
It's the parts with Audrey, who should be Trinidadian, like the audiobook, I was just like, who is this? Like, they have this generic Caribbean accent, which is sad because I think the author who did Mabel, I think she did an excellent job in the audiobook, but whosoever did Audrey, I was just like, this is not a Trini accent. This is nobody's accent. Who is this?
Yeah, when I read the first paragraph, even before I listened to the audiobook, I was like, what is going on? What, is this Trinidad, or is this, like, Jamaica, Grenada dad or something? Like, what's happening? But yeah, I mean, I know that aside from that, the book is excellent with regards
It's
to
so beautiful
stories. So yeah, I definitely want to get back into it and pay attention to those things. So I'll definitely do that. But I lent it to a friend before lockdown, and, like, it's
Yep.
I have to wait. Yeah, I have to wait until I see him again. What was I gonna say?
I think it's just actual. I think because it's just so much a reality. I think even if we're going to write about joy, there has to be a contrast with the trauma that we experience, even if it's there's no way, even if you grow up in the most loving home that's accepting, and you still exist in the broader society that can be very violent towards you. And I don't think that's unique to the Caribbean. I think that's everywhere in the world. So you can have these pockets of joy, and I do see that a lot in our Caribbean books. So even if it's in your bedroom with your lover or in your friend circle, there are these pockets of joy, but you still exist in this very rigid and violent society. So I don't think we will get to a place where it's all rainbows without at least discussing the trauma. But I do want more books of joy. I do want more books of high schoolers falling in love. I do want more books of trans people coming out to their parents and their parents go, come on, put your hand on time. That's what they say. So, like, I want those stories. And I think we just need more people feeling empowered to write them, and also more publishers who are willing to say, yeah, these stories are worth being told.
Somebody I work with, we were talking about like the Black Lives Matter movement and stuff and how that was impacting, because I work in a publishing house, like our industry and stuff. And a point that they made was people have to write through their pain before they can write their joy. And I feel like that's what we're seeing right now, is people writing their trauma so that they can get to that point and give us those stories as well. So I'm looking forward to that future.
Yeah. I think too, based on like the religion question, it sometimes we normalize these traumatic experiences as being, oh well, that just happened. I can't remember what book I was reading, and it's considered a Caribbean classic. And I think Saajid, you talked it through with me years ago, but it was so much domestic violence.
Miguel Street?
Throughout. Huh?
Was it Miguel Street?
Yes. Yes. And I was just like, how is this even okay? But then I realized, like, you know, it's in some of the songs we sing, it's in, you know, some of the rhymes we do. And so I think like some of that trauma is so culturally embedded that it just seems like a part of life until you know that it doesn't have to be, or it shouldn't be that way.
Yeah. Sophie in the comments, Sophie Lozophie, don't know if I'm saying that correctly, in the comments said, sadly, traumatic depictions are more realistic. And I agree with that, because I think, you know, that is the experience for a lot of people, especially, you know, people in the general masses, like, you know, the experience of traumatic, whether it's like physical abuse, whether it's like closeted stuff that you see. So you could have something that's more like violent or abusive, like in Here Comes the Sun, or something that's more subtle and hidden, like maybe in Brother or Valmiki's Daughter, right? So it is a lot more realistic to see that trauma. But I do feel like hopefully as we become more, you know, open to exploring trauma in literature, that we finally see the room for creating stories about joy that still address trauma, that still dances with trauma, as you were saying, Jareen, but like, you know, more stories like The Stars and the Blackness and maybe Hurricane Child, where, you know, we do have happy endings and we do have stories. I mean, the young adult and the middle grade books will definitely do that for us, right? But like, the books, like, I mean, I would live to see genre fiction, because I mean, right now, like Caribbean adult literature is just like literary fiction. But if we could get more like romance and mystery, or like but like, Linnell would eat that up, like queer romance.
I would.
Like queer romance in the Caribbean where it's happening. There's one?
I can't remember the name. Fiona Zadie. She actually, I think she won a Lambda, or she was nominated for a Lambda years ago, but she's Jamaican living in America. She writes romance novels. I started reading one a few months ago.
Linnell's ready.
It's like very steamy. It's very hot. It's very. I was reading it and I was just like, I should not be alone right now. So I'm putting. I don't remember what the name of the book is. I'm gonna look for it and let you know. But she's Jamaican American, and I hadn't heard about her until very recently. And I was just like, wait, she's doing big things. She's writing and she's doing very sexy, very gay, very.
We love it. Okay, we need to know more about this.
So I don't know. I wanted to read it and then start hyping it up. Like, oh my god, guys, you need to. I couldn't get through it because I was just like, yeah, this is way too sexy for quarantine time.
I love that. You know, like, how we not on lockdown. You know. L. Smith says, I want a Caribbean version of Call Me By Your Name, No Trauma. Like, yeah, we need more of that. Trini USA QT says, more fantasy in Caribbean fiction too. Right now, I'm reading a Caribbean book, but it's literary fiction, so I'm just not into it right now. There is fantasy. Like, I mean, Aloha Hudson just is amazing. Kiki's Cinnamon Smart. I guess
he writes queer stuff, but he does fantasy. I don't think we talk about him enough. I think he's from U.S. Virgin Islands.
Who's that?
Tobias.
Who's that?
Tobias Bucknell.
Sounds familiar.
He writes. I found out about him because I play video games, and he writes for Halo. And then I was like, wait, this man says he's from the Caribbean. And then I looked it up and I was like, oh my God, he's a Caribbean. He writes fantasy, he writes sci-fi. And I was just like, nobody's talking about him. That's weird. But he's really cool, really amazing stuff that I've read so far. And Kiki's saying, yeah, Tobias S. Bucknell. I did get the name right. Karen Lord is also really good and amazing, brilliant. And she's from Barbados. So we do have fantasy, but I do think literary fiction is the thing.
Oh, Tracy Baptiste. Yeah, that's a good one too.
Yeah, Tracy
I have
Baptiste.
the whole Jumbies.
Yeah, I want to read those.
Yeah. I had to explain it to an American friend when I was like, oh gosh, just read
I have a fantasy middle grade set in Barbados. I think it's called, I forgot the name.
Saajid, don't let me down like this.
Hold on.
All of us looking at our shelves.
I had it in my unhaul pile.
How dare.
Called My Fishy Stepmom.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh.
I've been meaning to read that. I hear it's really good.
Yeah, it's about this girl who has a stepmom who's like really a snake, I think. I don't know. If you look at the cover, she's like,
oh my gosh.
It's really interesting, and it's set in Barbados. So, Paige,
I will be picking that up.
Yeah. By the way, Blouse and Skirt Books, really good resource for young adult Caribbean stuff.
Amazing.
Definitely look it up. And if you buy their books, you're supporting like a regional publisher, not like US publishing Caribbean stuff.
Okay.
So definitely Blouse and Skirt Books. The books tend to be a lot more short. I think that's just kind of like a requirement for Caribbean YA, but still really good. Still really good.
Yeah.
I think that's like another
books. Amazing. I can just like I saw that book and I regret not buying it because it was like right before quarantine. I was like, oh, I'll come back and get it next time. The bookstore still hasn't opened. But once you see Blouse and Skirt on a book or Blue Banyan, just pick it up. It's going to be amazing. Like Tanya knows shit. She only publishes excellent work. So yeah.
The Beast of Cucuyo by Kevin Jarrett was saying, if you want to read like a mystery novel set in Trinidad.
Amazing.
Also, it's not queer or anything like that, but it's really intense. Kevin Jarrett was insanely talented. Blouse and Skirts, young adult, mystery, murder, amazing. Yeah. So, I mean, there's options if you want stories that don't deal with trauma and queerness, but I think, I mean, a lot of what we have right now intersects with trauma.
Yeah.
But hopefully we can get to a point where, yeah, Beast of Cucuyo was boss. Kiki, I agree. It's amazing. Cinnamon Smart is British Caribbean, and I'm excited for hers, but I want straight from the islands for the adults too. Yeah. That's another thing too, like a lot of, we have a lot of diasporic authors, and then sometimes that could kind of like, block authors like from the region as well. Some of the things Caribbean. Maybe it's diasporic or something. I have to look into that. But I've heard of it, definitely. But yeah, maybe we should move on. What was the next question I had here? Okay, so this is the last question. Do you think there's been a generational shift in how queerness is viewed in the Caribbean? I mean, I think, yeah, like definitely, but like, I guess like in relation to Caribbean literature.
Mm.
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure about Caribbean literature. I don't think I have enough. Because so much of, like, okay, so Claude McKay, for example, if you read a lot of critics from the earlier times, they don't mention his queerness. They write about his style, his way of writing. It's not until recently that people started mentioning queerness, and same for Una Morrison as well. It wasn't recently until people started mentioning. So I don't feel like I have enough context to say this is what's happened historically in Caribbean literature, this is what's happening now. But I can talk about Caribbean, like, or festival spaces where I do see a lot of obviously queer Caribbean writers, and no one mentions that they are. And then it's just until international media starts saying, oh, there's this gay author from blah, 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 that people start mentioning locally that, oh yeah, they're queer or they're gay or something like that. And I think because there's been a lot more international attention on the Caribbean in recent years, in the last 5 or so years, that we are seeing more publicity of Caribbean writers and of queer Caribbean stories that historically we just didn't have. So I don't know how to compare it. And just generally when it comes to queerness, I find oddly enough that my grandparents' generation is a lot more open than my parents' generation. And a lot of that is linked to the evangelical work that would have happened when my parents would have been growing up in Jamaica. So whereas my grandparents were more communal based, my parents were more the evangelical American gays wrong, homosexuality, they're coming to whatever.
Yeah.
So, it's been up and down with what's happening, and then now people are more open to it. So hopefully it keeps going up.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so I was thinking about it. I don't necessarily know that this is generational because these books haven't been published like that long ago. But Shamutu, so Serious Blooms came out, I think, in the 90s, 96, and this came out in 2008. So, like the way that she talks about queerness in the books, in a way, I kind of understand because of the time period and how it was different, but I'm also surprised by how progressive some of the things are. Like, for example, I just finished reading a chapter that I was really confused by because one of the characters who we met earlier on in the story was kind of revealed to be trans. But the way that she writes about this character's transness is really interesting. It's like the character is born a girl, and then as the character grows over time, they just start to like act like a boy, think like a boy, do things like a boy. So the parents just went along with it. And to the point where the narrative, some of the narrative in this book is almost a little bit fantastical. So it's like the characters were just like, the parents were just like, oh, well, we have a boy now. And they didn't make any, it was just like a transformation. It was like an evolution. It was really strange. So I didn't expect to see that in a book that was published in like 1996, you know? And I guess that's just my own bias of thinking, like, you know, only like within the past 15 years or 10 years, people have started becoming progressive. But no, these things have existed for centuries, and gender queerness has existed for centuries. Like you were talking about your grandparents versus your parents, and perhaps that might have to do with like them coming from a more, as you say, a communal-based community where that like strict level of Christianity might not have been as instituted. And like also too, like when I'm reading, like when I read this book, there were a lot of like the language in here is not like similar to like the language we use now. They don't say things like queer or gay or bad or anything like that. They say like homosexual, like, you know, they say, and if they do say queer, it's the bad kind of queer. It's like not the reclaimed queer that we use today. So it's very interesting because obviously her books are progressive and they do talk about queerness in a way that is progressive and that doesn't like push the narrative that being queer is wrong. But I think the language is probably something that's changing, because I guess if you read maybe Stars on the Blackness or something like that, you would be, that book might be set in a more in a sort of cultural environment where the language is different. Where she's going to America, so she's been exposed to different ideas that might help her expand more on what her queerness is and what does that mean, as opposed to with these books, the characters are not in that kind of geopolitical context where they're able to explore that through language and through identity, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And that's exactly what happened in the Stars and the Blackness between them. She went to school and she went to this LGBT, I think it was like a pride group in school, and she was just like, I don't think I know anybody who's lesbian. And because the language was just not something she was familiar with. And I think it's a bit sad that in the Caribbean, a lot of our language around queerness mirrors what happens in a Western context. And the language that is indigenous to us is just so violent. So I wish we had our own language that felt like home, felt more familiar. So yeah, I don't know if there'll be attempts to reclaim some of these violent words, but we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of reclaim some of them sometimes. I mean, like,
in my private circles, but no, not around straight people. Like, I don't trust them like that.
No. Lanelle and I were talking about this before the live show, like how, Caribbean gays love Boom Bye Bye and all these Kill the Batty Man songs. Kind of like taking the power that song might have over you, like you're reclaiming it. And it's just like, it's become like ironic stereotype, like the gays just be pumping these songs.
Yes. And then we'll just, honestly, at parties, all of the most homophobic songs were there. And then the moment, it's just straight people around, you're just like, how dare you?
Yeah, that's not for you.
But all the gay parties, oh God.
I love it. Girl. Does anyone read Home Home as yet? I want to read Home Home so bad.
No, I haven't.
You read it? You read it, Jareen?
No.
Okay. Home Home sounds really cool. It's about a Trinidadian girl who leaves Trinidad to go stay with her gay aunt in Toronto, I think. So it's kind of like, it sounds like it's going to be a good time. I really want to check that out. It sounds really good. I definitely want to read that sometime this year. The meaning of the song changes completely, yes, Kiki. It does.
Gosh. Like Mana the Least Summer Problem is my lesbian anthem, because that was not what the song meant. But Mana the Least Summer Problem, me left idiot to have them, honestly. That is my lesbian anthem right there.
We love it. We love it.
We're going way off topic.
That's also on brand.
Which we're kind of approaching. We usually do like a song. Lanelle said that she was gonna play something at the end. Did you find something?
Remember, all of the choices I was throwing out, didn't align with the topic. So I didn't end up picking anything.
She was gonna play Boom Bye Bye.
I was not gonna pick that one. I was not gonna pick that one. Stop it. Before I start getting hate messages.
No, you're gonna get so much hate messages, especially from international gay advocates who are going to be like, no, this song, and you're just like, calm down.
We cool with Buju, like we know, we have a.
Oh gosh, let me see.
I'm looking in the comments to
Diana King. Yeah. I don't know what shy guy means anymore, but
my anthem.
I don't know the words to that though.
My anthem for years was Nothing Them Not Have Over Me by Chinsia. Because the way she sings about stealing people's man is just inspiring. Like, I love it.
Ooh, another song.
Man, me no care. If you take a man, girl, me I no fair. Like,
we are not condoning anybody to break up relationships here.
We will take him anytime, anywhere, and we sit down on him like a chair. That is poetry.
Wow.
Like a chair. Like, wow. Because you sit on a chair.
The wheels have come off the bus.
I can't remember the name of that soca song. It's pretty old now. I think it's like probably 4 or 5 years. The one that said "Come out for live my life, drink a
Yeah,
rum and-"
live my life,
I was
mashup.
like, that's on my gay anthem because I was like, yes, we come out for live. So that's another one. I should make like a playlist of like songs that are not meant to be gay but are totally gay for me.
Gay
That's
adjacent.
Yes.
Oh, someone
Yeah,
is recommending Lady Saw.
Which
Oh
one?
Lord, I got you, man, and you can't do anything
No,
about it. Lady Saw
no.
Oh my god, that's a throwback. I cannot.
Lady Saw and see I could run.
Oh my god, Dad.
I guess I did end up singing at the end. I thought I wasn't going to sing at
We
the
got a
end.
whole concert. It was great. It was perfect. I'm here for it.
All right, y'all. Shall we wrap up now? We went a little 5 minutes over the hour.
Oh.
Okay.
I'm just trying to read through the comments really quick to see
Okay,
if
well,
we.
okay.
No, that sounds like the second one.
Not a big deal, right? I was just like saying.
We don't have. Do we have a Goodreads? No. Or
No,
do
we
we?
don't. We probably
We'll work
should.
on that. We'll work on that.
Yeah, of all the books we read.
I have a playlist on my channel of all of the lives that we did, both on my channel and pages.
Mhm.
Oh, we must announce the next book.
Oh,
Right?
What
Okay,
is-
so
did we
during
choose?
the live show, didn't we pick the next book?
Did y'all? I feel like I missed this entire conversation.
yes.
That's on brand.
Okay,
what
so
is it?
No, we did.
We
Yeah.
did it.
Corinne,
I
you
don't
know
know.
this book because I think you recently read it.
Which one?
I don't know where my iPad is, but yes, it was the one. Yes.
Oh
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
This is the far side of Bird Hill. We'll be taking a flight onto Pages Land.
Barbados.
Yeah. Which I
This
can't
book
go
is
back to because of COVID.
in the 1980s, I believe it is. And it follows two sisters. Did you like it? What did you think of it, Jareen?
Yeah.
I did like it. I liked it a lot. It felt like someone in book club said it, where it said it felt like the type of book you would read in high school, but better. So it felt like that type of Caribbean canon literature book, but it was much better than the ones you'd read in high school.
Nice.
But I liked it a lot. I liked The Grandmother. It's a really nice story. I want to hear more Bajans speak about what they think about the book, because I think it's, for me, it was great. But I know if you're in the actual country, sometimes you might have a different opinion. But I love stories that are matrifocal. I love stories with sisters. I love stories with girls that exercise their autonomy. So it was just a really great book overall for me.
I'm not even more excited.
I want to read it.
Well, Paige will give us that good own voices perspective.
Yeah. I'm ready for this. I'm so excited.
And it'll be on your channel, so that's good.
Oh my god, yeah. True.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. We'll be having the live show on Paige's channel next month. Yeah, so at the end of next month, we'll confirm.
Linnell's like next month.
Yeah. I mean,
What happened? Was I not paying attention when we did all of this? I'm so
you bought
sorry.
the wrong book.
Huh?
I think
Yeah, that's right. That's right. You're right. I purchased the wrong book. Yeah. On brand. It's fine. It's fine.
What?
I think you are more serious than the night. Then I think we're planning on reading. Anyway, yeah.
It's because you and Paige have these like 3 o'clock in the morning conversations, and I'm like, I'm sleeping. I'm old.
Yeah. So I mean, pick it up, give it a read, and tune in with us next month. This one. I'm really excited for that. I will leave everybody's information down below. So I will leave all of the links to Jareen's social media and the Rebel Woman website. I'll also leave Paige and Linnell down below as well. I still have to go and do that, so don't. Okay, so does anybody else want to say anything before we conclude? Do you have any, proclamations?
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. This was fun.
I feel like this was like the most concise live chat we've had. So good job, everybody. Fantastic.
We were on good behavior because we had company. That's what it is.
True.
Yes.
I'll let my mother know. But thank you guys so much for having me. It was really sweet. Thank you. It means a lot.
Yeah, we're glad
Feel free to
you.
come back anytime. Truly, you're always
Yeah.
welcome.
They say that, and then you just show up at their house, and then they're just
Yeah.
you guys, I'm live, and I'm like, guys, let me in. Let me in.
Yeah, you should do that. Like, Mikasa. It's just one big house.
Mhm.
Paige and Linnell, right now.
Guys, read Camilo, read Nella Hopkinson, read more
America.
Caribbean authors. Like, they have to work their ass off to get published by some of these publishers, and these publishers don't deserve them most of the time. So read them, support them, and support local and regional publishers as well, because they're doing. Honestly, the bar is this high for Caribbean writers, like all the way up there. And then down the bottom, you have some, I don't know, some look-away authors that nobody really pay attention to, but they get all the attention. So yeah, support Caribbean writers, because it's really hard for me to find bad books by Caribbean authors. The bar is up there.
Yeah. We good. The will of us. All right. So thank you so much to Joreen for joining us today. Thank you to my co-hosts, Paige and Linnell, and thank you to our viewers, our 12 to 20 viewers, because it was fluctuating. We appreciate it. We love you. It's a love. So yeah, Stan Caribbean authors, go stream all Shantia's music and Lady Saw. Thanks for joining us. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.